And we're back for another one. And with the walls now poured and hardened up, we're working on the floors. So let's get into it, starting with the first thing we've hired out so far in this project. Now we wanted a rat slab in the crawl space to serve as cover for the insulation and vapor barrier that Alila diligently laid and sealed. Now I've previously mentioned that we plan to fully condition the crawl space as sort of a mini basement, and that's mostly for comfort, efficiency, backfill support, and because it'll be much nicer to have a conditioned service cavity. Now, while Alila did most of the work on laying the insulation, we ended up choosing to hire out the slab. And there were a number of reasons for this, but mostly it's that we'd like to bank on calling in our favors for when we do the next ICF pour for the main walls and not for this. Trying to coordinate a bunch of amateurs for this much flat work in a confined area, in the absolute best case, would have been a severe challenge and significant chaos. Now, as an added bonus, there were complications that would have wrecked this as an amateur pour, and it turned out to be the earliest concrete pour I've ever heard of happening on a residential site, and the crew said the same thing, with the first truck on site and ready to pour at 5 a.m. Now luckily we have tolerant neighbors. The hired crew made a quick Friday morning of this, and Alil and I got to relax a little bit more in the afternoon, catching up on some just general property cleanup and maintenance tasks. As we rolled into Saturday, I was back to get started on the interior stem walls. There are going to be 4 in total, right above the strip footings we saw over the last few videos. Each stem wall sits under a load-bearing partition and will support the end of our open web trusses. I used double top plates on these walls so I could keep the 24-inch centers, but not have to worry about being exactly perfect with my layout on the trusses. If I ended up being off an inch or two from being directly over one of these studs, I and the structure can live with that. Now we did go back and forth in deliberation on whether we wanted to use I-joists or open web floor trusses. I knew I wanted to use an engineered joist, both for the consistent dimensions, but also Advantech requires something engineered to maintain their squeak-free guaranteed, so I knew I was going that route. In the end, the trusses were only about 50 cents more per linear foot than the I-joists, and it gave us a full 3.5-inch bearing surface for the subfloor sheets. This was not as insignificant a factor as it might be for a professional crew. The extra width at the butt ends of the subfloor requires a little less refinement to both my cutting tolerances and my nail gun skills. One other factor was that while we could have done single I-joists to span edge to edge with just the mid-span wall support, there was always the possibility I would be doing some of this work solo, and the shorter trusses are a bit easier to manage alone. Now luckily, I didn't have to worry about that as Alila was willing to share some of her strength for this part. The last advantage to the trusses was that we also get the open webs, and that'll help keep the plumbing, electric, and HVAC a little bit tidier. Now sure, I-joists have pretty generous drilling allowances, but now I don't have to worry about spending time or energy on any of that work. And besides that, I don't get the satisfaction of this sort of alignment. Now getting the trusses in place actually took us 2 days. The first round was placed the day I built the stem walls, and we carried into Sunday to finish placing the rest. We learned a few things on the first day that helped us on day 2, particularly how to lift a full bunk of trusses without them shifting all over the place. We probably could have placed most of these in one day if we didn't spend quite so much time learning what not to do. But hey, learning is part of why we're doing this. And after we got all the trusses in, it was time to lock it all in by starting the subfloor. Now I'll apologize right now for the lack of detail in this camera view. I was kind of hoping to get a little better footage by looking at the whole build site at once, but my expertise really lives more in the engineering realm and not in camera work. Hopefully that'll improve over time. In any case, I mentioned earlier that we're using Advantech subflooring. And to an amateur, this is kind of an interesting product to use. I don't have anything negative to say about it, but there were 2 really big learnings that I took away from this whole process. First, I did not realize just how much heavier this stuff is going to be than commodity OSB. Each 3/4 inch thick sheet was at least 15 to 20 pounds heavier than a standard sheet of OSB. I've got the strength for that, but my body was definitely complaining about my lack of overall fitness and endurance to be able to do that for a full day. Once Monday morning rolled around, I was feeling it. The second realization is just how snug the tongues and grooves are on this product. Getting these sheets to lock together was a true exercise in firm, but also delicate persuasion. Luckily, I'm not averse to learning a few things on YouTube, and Awesome Framers has a few good videos that you might want to check out if you're going to use this product and learn about that quirk. Now, as another aside, I've been asking Alila with every relatively major step, does this feel like our house is taking shape yet? And every time I ask, she would reply with, not yet, or maybe when the footings are in, or when the foundation is in, or maybe when the subfloor goes on. But it was about halfway through the subfloor when I got the first glimpse that she was kind of getting excited for what was starting to take shape as our home. And I'll admit, I'm starting to feel that too. Now, we're a long way off from being done, but as we start ticking items off that insanely long to-do list, it's finally feeling like progress and not just hopes and wishful thinking. Now, of course, even as I say that for this voiceover, I realize it's still pretty wishful thinking to have any concept that this is anything more than a few percentage points complete. As I sit here and edit this footage, this was many weeks ago now in the past, but one thing Alila and I have learned about major home projects is to bask in the accomplishment of even partial completions. Remember that every step forward is towards something new, and that, for us at least, tends to give us some fuel to keep going. Now, after a couple of days of work with Alila occasionally dipping her hair in the subfloor adhesive, and with me wrestling the panels and occasionally fighting jams in the nail gun, we have something to show for our efforts. We can walk around on our actual first floor. I hope you guys are finding something to enjoy in these videos. And if you are, I'd appreciate you guys interacting with the like button, subscribing if you haven't yet, and leaving a comment. Preferably one of encouragement, one of criticism if that fits your fancy more. In the next one, we're going to start stacking our next round of ICF blocks, and I'm probably going to ask Alila again if she feels like it's a house yet. But until then, thanks for checking in.